would have come to his house suggests that he believes they could have disarmed his alarm, perhaps then used a ladder to go into that bathroom, slid the door open, went inside his house, and then locked, or at least closed themselves behind the toilet cubicle. Gerinel, of course, has been saying all morning, all of these things, all of these facts that he's presenting on his version are improbable.
I think Gerinel is saying more than that. He is saying, in fact, that it's a tissue of lies, that he is going to argue at the end of the case that it's a tissue of lies, it's been contrived, it's been manufactured, and that is why he's meticulously testing every aspect of that story and taking Oscar through it tortuously to show that at every point this story simply doesn't stand up.
Because, at times he's made him trip over simple things like, Oscar Pistorius in his evidence in chief said he'd whispered for Riva Steenkamp to get down and to call the police, and today was quite adamant. In fact, Gerinel asked him a number of times, did you whisper? And he says, no, I spoke in a soft manner. Now, what is whispering but speaking in a soft manner?
I think from Nell's point of view, once he takes the stance that the story is untrue, then he's proceeding on the basis that we all know, and this is what he'll say to the court at the end, that truth does not repose alone. It has to be supported by other truths, facts, and circumstance. And that is why he's examining what you might call the building blocks of the story and knocking them down one by one, or trying to knock them down one by one, to show that this is a house of cards. It's been manufactured. It doesn't actually exist. So that is why he will take Oscar through every single aspect of his story.
And of course, even if we move away from the events of the night in question, but if we look at other events that have been discussed in this trial, particularly when it came to what is now being termed a lot as the character evidence, the idea that Oscar Pistorius would be followed on the highway with somebody trying to shoot at him. He remembers flashes, he remembers seeing red and white. He then remembers his escape route, which off-ramp he took, how he stopped at the shopping center at this Rhapsody's restaurant to be picked up by somebody whom he forgets. And then the next day they go and fetch his car, and he can't remember that detail of who went with him to go fetch his vehicle.
Yes, I think State Counsel is going to draw the court's attention to this characteristic about Oscar Pistorius. There is marvelous information, exquisite detail on everything else except certain critical points, and each of them relate to him taking responsibility or becoming accountable. At that point, Oscar goes into what I have called delicious vagueness mode. So you see him saying, yes, I had the gun in the restaurant. It must have gone off on its own. Oh yes, I was at the toilet, and but I didn't actually point it and intentionally shoot it at a person whom I presumed was behind the door. So Gerinel is tackling these issues because it will be a part of his case, his argument, his submission, that Oscar just won't take responsibility for what he has done at every single aspect of the evidence, and therefore that is the problem as regards his plea of not guilty in murdering Riva Steenkamp.
But also, could it be fair to say that many of the details he does remember could only be understood or explained by himself, but a lot of the details that he can't remember are those details that can be corroborated by other people?
That's a fair observation, but we do see this golden thread, if you might call it that, whereby Oscar denies everything, It's at the heart of his defense that everybody is lying, even to the extent that the state is ill-motivated against him. Gerenel is going to make as much mileage as he can out of that.
How does that all work out? Because, of course, we did see when the state was presenting its case that there were difficulties around the chain of evidence. There were difficulties around certain things being explained. Of course, Gerenel's going to argue that, you know, the police, even if they had tried to, they would not have known Oscar Pistorius' version and therefore couldn't have tampered with things to go against it. But nonetheless, there were problems, and Barry Rue was able to raise them in his cross-examination of some of particularly the SAPS officials.
Yes and no. At the heart of that, what we might call problem, is that the reality is that the police didn't know and could not have anticipated Oscar's explanation of the events on the night in question. And it is too much of a coincidence to then try to make mileage of the fact that they might have just coincidentally moved the fan, coincidentally drawn the curtain and moved the duvet in a way that now embarrasses Oscar's case. That can't just happen by accident, that level of coincidence. I think that's the point that Gerenel is making. Whatever else, whatever other trampling on the scene they might have done.
What about just the idea of reasonable doubt? Because this is one of the things we've discussed at some length, that, you know, obviously the defense has to prove reasonable doubt. But we are now seeing, obviously, Gerenel, you know, plugging a lot of doubt in Oscar's version.
I had said to you yesterday, Bongani, that Oscar will be found guilty unless he proves that the killing of Riva Steenkamp was legally excusable. And I think other guests have explained the technical nature of his defense, imputed self-defense, I think it's called, something like that. But basically it means that Oscar has to be believed. And I believe he has to be believed implicitly. And therefore his credibility, his reliability is non-negotiable from the defense point of view.
Judge, let's leave it there for now, but still lots for you and I to discuss throughout this afternoon.
Okay.
More to come with Judge Chris Greenland.